welcome to another episode of the Wrist Cheese Radio Podcast, your place for horological hot takes, taboo topics, and often unpopular watch opinions. As always, my name is Schmidt, and I'm joined by my good buddy. You guys know him. You love him, Mr. Bro Dinky. Bro, episode 38. How we doing, my friend?
Good. Kind of a frustrating day, can't lie. Had a long day at work, and then the wife was originally supposed to have the kids. They went to Jersey to visit one of her college friends. They were supposed to stay over around 8, 9 o'clock. I said, "Oh, you putting the kids to bed?" "No, we're coming home." Turns out my little guy had a little too much to eat, barfed all over the car. And so I've been dealing with that for the past hour and a half.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I try to get back in the mindset for the episode here. I was jazzed up because I know we have a pretty good topic tonight, and we had some exciting news today. So I was pretty excited, and then I kind of got thrown for a loop, and I'm trying to get myself motivated and back in the swing here, so I can deliver a good episode for the peeps out there.
Well, I hope your little guy is feeling a lot better. It's when you're a parent, and to all our parents out there, you know exactly that moment where your kid's just gonna wreck shop, and it's never a good time. Never a good time. I've experienced it. I've experienced that myself with my daughter, and it's just covered head to toe, and just like, okay, I guess I'm now gonna clean everything. So
yeah, and you can imagine with all that in mind, having okay, we'll record tonight. That makes perfect sense. I'll be home alone, nothing to do. Yeah. No, so that all happened. Then they're home, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to go downstairs and record. That obviously went over very well. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and I'll say this. I mean, it's the same story for me too. With my wife and my kids. We are working people. We're normal dads, and we are trying to fit this in to schedule this and record these episodes for you guys. So
till I start getting this influencer money, all right.
Yeah, exactly. We're normal guys just like everybody else, so we're trying to make it work. And sometimes, even recording a podcast late at night is not always the most ideal, but it is what it is. But I hope everything gets better for you, bro. Rough night, I'm sure, but things will certainly work themselves out.
Yes, indeed. So today, obviously, we had some news that we're going to cover, partly because it's something that had been on the wish list, I think, for this year. And for those who are not in the loop, today is Friday, and we got a new Tudor Ranger.
Bum, bum, bum.
Now, when they were teasing the sort of forestry and all that, when they dropped the Blackback Pro and the root beer, I had thought that seemed very Ranger-esque to me, and a few other people were like, yeah, I think it's either got to be a Ranger or a North Flag. And I saw this, Greenland North. I said, okay, here we go, Ranger or North Flag again. And thank God they finally delivered one of them. So far, I think the reviews, the feeling is kind of lukewarm within the community.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely has, it's got its pros and cons. I think it's definitely an upgrade from the 41. I thought the 41 was a little bit of a dumpster fire, to be honest.
Yeah, it was oversized and not in a good way. I mean, it made sense for the time that this is what, like 2014 or 2013 that they released that model. It made sense. Things were a little bit larger back then, but it needed to come down in size for sure.
Yeah. It was a good idea. It's a great vintage watch. Like the originals, I adore. They're beautiful watches, even though they're obviously in the style and fashion of the Explorer. This was just considered an affordable tool watch that you could put through its paces, and that's kind of what Tudor is now. It's a brand that you can beat around. It's supposed to be tough, born to dare, yada yada. So I think that watch totally lives up to that hype. And the newer Ranger, it was a good idea. It came on a bund or the fabric strap, rivet bracelet. It had a lot of quirks. Like, it was, if you're into quirky watches, it was probably for you. It never really sat well with me. And so when I finally heard new Ranger, I was excited. I'm not completely disappointed. I'm not going to say that. But before we start getting into personal takes and everything, I guess we'll just run down the watch here. I mean, so it's a 39 mil, right?
Yep.
Which is nice. It's down from 41. I think a
It's
little
a
more.
much more vintage modern size. I mean,
Yeah,
let's be honest. We've talked about 39 before. I remember we covered the Constellation Globemaster in 39. The guy's like, man, if it was a 38, I would have been all over it. I'm like, really, 1 millimeter, guys?
I did
Um,
see that comment today, FYI.
so again, I'm just like, okay, it makes sense. The vast majority of people are going to want that size. It's a good size. 39 is fine. Um, but yeah, I mean, aesthetics. What do you think, bro? I mean,
It's not the Tudor Ranger I would want remade, if I can be
okay,
100% honest. I'm a person who likes, I don't want to say bells and whistles, but if I'm going to make a Tudor Ranger, I want it to look as Tudor Ranger-y as possible. And
yeah,
I think my favorite iteration of the Tudor Ranger is the one that comes with the Cyclops, a date, and a roulette date wheel. Because I don't know why people aren't doing roulette date wheels anymore. Roulette date wheels are bomb.
they're cool. It's such. My dad has a date just with a roulette date wheel. I think I've mentioned on the pod before, and every time I see it, it's just cool. It's just very cool. Every other alternating date is either red or black. It looks fantastic. It's on a white date disc. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome. It's such a cool feature, and it's so simple. It's such a simple feature, but it's so quintessential Rolex Tudor. Like that is a thing that they used to do a lot of back in the day, and we don't see any of that really anymore from the collections.
And it was something
Any
that
of
the
them.
brand shared, which is not that common.
No.
So that's something I would have liked. I don't expect that. Listen, I don't think brands these days think that far into it as far as what the enthusiasts are concerned with. I
Yeah.
think they look at it and they say, "Okay, is there a market for this watch? Yes, okay, we'll make it." But if I'm getting that, I want just a few little nods here and there. I would like some smiley text.
I
I
know.
think the Tudor smiley is great.
I miss it. I miss it so
Again, we've
much.
talked about the Tudor Rose. That would have been a nice touch. I think they
Yeah.
put it on the crown, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right on that. I think you're right on that. I think it has the crown, the rose motif on the crown. Yeah.
But a
Yes, it
Tudor
does.
Rose on the dial would have been sweet. I mean, we're harkening back 70
But
years, allegedly.
yeah, allegedly. But I will say this. I will say this. Technically in history, the version that this particular Ranger is stylized after, that particular version when it came out in the mid 1960s, it featured, well, one of them featured a rose and one of them featured
Yes.
a shield. So technically, you could be pulling from the later 60s reference, which it looks like they did, but even still, that one did come with a date. It did come, with that Cyclops in the date, especially in the roulette format. So there's a few things they could have added. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not saying one is right or wrong over the other, but if we're gonna do a reissue, let's knock it out the park here, right?
Let's go all
I'm not
in.
I'm not trying to hit a single.
But do you think the vast majority of people want a no date versus a date, or do you think the opposite?
I think if we're talking general public, I have heard this directly from people at brands. Date watches sell much better than no date watches.
I would agree
I
with that.
I personally don't mind a no date at all. I
Yeah.
have no date watches. I like it because it's one less thing to set. To be honest, as lazy as that
Yeah. Yeah.
sounds,
Yeah.
but
No, I
sometimes
mean,
you
it's
just you
true,
just
though.
don't want to
It's
set
true.
it.
It's true. Absolutely true.
But I think as far as practicality goes, and I think for sort of the more pragmatic buyer, they see date and they say, you know what, it's nice to be able to tell that just by a flick of the wrist. I don't have to take my phone out and click a button. And again, that sounds awfully lazy, but it's just a convenience factor.
But again, it would be one thing if it was a watch that historically never featured a date at all, and then we added it. That can be kind of a downside. Like I know when the Legend Divers came out, they came out many
Yes.
years ago. The first production run of the Legend Diver from Longines, like it was a no date, and everyone was kind of like, eh. Then they came out with a date version, and then by about that same time, the collectors started getting turned on to this watch, And everyone's like, oh no, it has a date now, and the original didn't. And now everyone wants a no date, and those are very desirable in the marketplace, but they only produce them for a few years because now all the modern versions, I believe, do have still dates. Um, so it's great. It's a simple thing, like you said, it is a convenience point. But based on my experience too, the average consumer wants a date. Now,
Yes.
I'm not talking about the WIS people in the community. I'm not talking about watch collectors. I'm talking about your average run of the mill person who's going to walk into a store and is going to buy a timepiece. They want something rugged. They want something simple. They want something high quality. They want something that is going to be a very utilitarian piece to wear. The Tudor Ranger certainly could be that for them, especially given the price point. But most people are going to want a date because it's just one more extra convenience factor that they can get on their watch. Watch community, we could really, I feel like in the watch community, it's really 50-50 with people who want dates and people who don't want dates.
Yeah.
I, like you, I don't, it doesn't matter to me. I have several watches without dates. I just got the Moon Swatch and that one doesn't have a date. So, it can be done and it can be done well. And sometimes you don't even miss it because I certainly don't.
Yeah, and so I wanted to run down, I think, the positives first before we get to, I don't want to say the negatives, but just things that
You would
either
change.
I would change or complaints that I've seen. And we'll get to those in a little bit also as well. But I got to say, no rivets on the bracelet. Bravo.
Yeah, I think
Right?
that's a
That
smart look.
bracelet looks very sleek. It looks very good without them. It looks like it blends to the case very well as far as continuity from like the side profile because you don't have those rivets kind of breaking up your eye lines and things.
Yeah.
Adjustable T clasp, gotta love it. I think all Tudors going forward are either going to have this or some kind of rendition of it. So got to give him props there. That was a big selling point for a lot of people on everybody's wish list, I think, because they have the capability of doing it. You've seen they have adjustable clasps and things like the Pelagos, and obviously Rolex has it in pretty much everything. So to be able to have a little on the fly adjustment, especially when you're getting it in things like micro brands, finally people can breathe a little easier. And like we said before, it's just another nice selling point about this watch.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The usual knock on Tudor watches, not so prevalent here. It looks like it comes in around 12 millimeters thick. No complaints there,
Yeah,
right?
pretty thin for a sport watch for sure, for sure.
And I think probably maybe the most appealing part about this is a lot of people consider this to be a tremendous value proposition coming in around $3,000.
Yeah, on bracelet, it's even less
Yes.
on the strap
Yes, it
options,
is.
which again, arguably a very very high quality price point, arguably a very competitive price point given other watches that are kind of in this range. I mean, you're looking at some entry tags, you're looking at Longines. I mean, if I was really going to walk in and buy an entry level Tudor, this is a watch that I would personally own. Period. It's an in-house caliber. It's all those good things. I know you're going to get to that, but the price point is extremely attractive on bracelet. What I think is 3,050. I
Something
think
like
is the
that.
U.S. price point for this new watch. But it just looks good. I think it's going to do well for Tudor. I mean, I think we can all argue that it will. I just don't know how easy it's going to be to get. That's going to be the big challenge.
Yeah, and that's yet to be seen. I think it might kind of be like the Black Bay 58 Blue was at first, where it was, oh, you're not going to be able to get these. And now everybody's got one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So on to what I want to say. Actually, before I go there, I want to say above all else, this is progress for Tudor, right? I think this is a sign of progress. This is a sign of moving forward. And that's probably the biggest kudos I'll give them is that they appear to be
Listening.
listening, making a charge, making an effort. And I think people appreciate that, whether they like this watch or not. At least it's effort, which is something that I think a lot of people have questioned, us
Yeah,
included.
yeah. I mean, again, absolutely. It's we've and the thing is, it's funny is we've talked about this watch before. We've
Yes.
talked about that we wanted this watch to come back. That many different times we thought it was going to be teased. We thought we were going to announce it, and we got something different. And now we have it. And I don't want to say that we have a crystal ball and we can see into the future, but it's kind of crazy that we keep coming up with the predictions. We were right about the doxa that came out earlier this year. That from the time that we posted the podcast episode, it dropped within like a couple weeks, which is crazy to me. And then we're right about this one. And I think that this is a watch that's going to do really, really well for Tudor, and I think it's a step in the right direction for them. My only thing that I'll kind of touch on when we get to the things that we could have wished for was some more stuff with maybe the movement, and we'll talk about that.
Sure. So going on to that, one thing that kind of always bugs me about Tudor bracelets in general is the very pronounced female end link situation.
Okay.
Right? There's something about the way that they join their bracelets to the case. It just doesn't, at least for me, lend to a great wear. It almost contributes more to that bobble back and forth on your wrist, because if you look, the hinges are like right where the watch sits on top of your wrist. And I've had this problem with more or less every Tudor I've ever owned, and I've owned a few of them. Okay. I just don't like the way the bracelets fit that way. If you notice, Rolex does not use that design. They use more of the male end link.
Yeah.
And I know some people like it, and some people say, "Oh, well, it fits my wrist better this way, that way." I find it to be a much less comfortable wear.
And this is something that I myself have kind of teetered back and forth with, because I have watches with bracelets with both, and I'll say this: for a long time when I was selling Omega back in the day, Omega was one of those brands that did a lot with the male end link attachment. And the biggest problem for the average person, especially if they were a little bit smaller in stature, is that the way that it would connect to the case, the bracelet would always start further away from the actual lug distance itself,
wider,
and then protrude downwards. So if you did have a smaller wrist, it made the watch very bulky, and it really exacerbated the idea that your wrist was small and the watch looked big on you.
Yeah.
Right. So when you switch to a female end link, what it does is it allows the bracelet to drape naturally from the lugs, which represents the true lug to lug distance, therefore the actual wearing comfort of the watch. Now, if you have a larger wrist or stockier wrist, what it does is quite the opposite. Now the bracelet hinges upwards and then out, because it's trying to contour around your wrist. It's a wider in profile. So that's must be what you're kind of experiencing. But I'll say this, for me personally, having a little bit smaller of a wrist, I have about a 7-inch wrist on a good day. Typically, if I'm swelled up, maybe 7.25 ish. But that's after a few drinks or so. But for me, I have found that the female end link bracelets fit much more comfortable. But I have bracelets with the male end links. My Seamaster 300, the vintage one, has that bracelet, and it seems to wear just fine. But it is, could be a point of contention for people. So
yeah, where I find it comes into play with these watches is, if you've ever seen the back of a Tudor, they have sort of that protruding case back. So it compounds the issue of it wearing tall with all their watches, because they're all pretty thick or tall, and especially they do pretty high dome crystals.
Yeah.
You get sort of that refrigerator on your wrist feeling from it, and I think the female end link contributes to that.
Yeah,
that's where I feel about that. Yeah.
And the other thing too, we've also seen too where they put their lug holes.
Yes.
Right. Like, I mean, you've talked about this before on the podcast. Like, you're like, yeah, I used to put my watches on different straps, and it's like it was horrible, because it was like 5 millimeters away from the actual case of the strap, based on where they put the spacing for the lug holes, and it had this massive gap.
So you kick a field goal through there, man.
So it just looks odd, to the average consumer. And if you are changing that, which again, Tudor's trying to make watches that are accessible to collectors and that people want to buy. This type of utilitarian watch should be a strap monster.
Yes.
So, it should be something that we should be able to switch straps in and out and be able to accessorize them however we want to. So we'll see if that's the case once people start getting these watches in the metal.
On to some other things that I saw just throughout the day periodically of people discussing this watch. I know a lot of people are thrown off by the printed indices. People like Applied. Applied is fancy. I know obviously they didn't have that way back when, so it might be a little more traditional, but I know a lot of people were pretty up in arms about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. To me, this lends itself to an aesthetic choice. It's a design thing. The original was like that, but here's the trade-off. Okay, um, back then in the 1960s, which there's two references that basically this particular new Ranger is really stylized after. There's a version that was a reference. Let's see here. It was a version reference 9050 in 1969, and the previous reference, which was the 7995 in 1965. So basically, this new Ranger, according to Tudor's website, is really stylized after these two references. Okay. Now, what's interesting is back then they were using tritium dials.
Yep.
So you could do a thin application of tritium on the dial and still make a very intense glow, bright dial because the tritium was radioactive. It would glow itself. Now, the problem in a modern context for that is now you're using superluminova. That means you're doing a very thin application of superluminova. And I've already seen a lume shot of this watch. I don't think people are going to be happy with the lume. I was very underwhelmed. The video that I saw, it was posted on YouTube today. There was a watch jewelry company called Brent Miller's, and they did a quick hands-on with the bracelet version and the hybrid strap version. He did a quick shot with the lume, and this guy always charges up the dials to show the lume in all his videos. He did it, and it was horrible. He's like, yeah, it's pretty legible, but it sounded like he was trying to
sugarcoating it.
Exactly. He knew it was bad comparatively to some of the other stuff that he showcased on his videos. And he was like, yeah, it's pretty good. You can definitely see the contrast with the dial, but it looked faint, and it already looked like it was losing power just from him turning the lights off, and it letting, within a few seconds it started to change. So I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed with the actual lume itself.
I'll say this: my Pelagos had among the best lume I've ever had. It was unreal. My GMT did not. It left a lot of room to be desired, and it's a black bay. It's not like it's a
they had applied a
press model or something. Yeah, it was a black bay GMT. It should have been pretty good, and it wasn't that it was bad. It just left more to be desired.
Yeah, for sure. Damn, that's crazy. But yeah, I mean, in this video, I think once people see the lume shots of these watches, they're not going to be too happy about it.
Another interesting little tidbit I saw somebody bring up is that this watch is, I think, completely brushed.
Yes.
I don't think there is any other finish on this watch.
No.
I don't know how that's going to be in person. I mean, obviously, I want to see it. I want to check it out, try it on, see what's up, but no other finishing anywhere?
As far as I can tell, there is not. Now, again, it's kind of hard to look. I'm basing everything based off some of the press photos that I've got, some of the stock shots that people have been posting on social, but it looks like there's some beveling on the case, but I don't think it's a polished bevel. I just think it's a different textured finish on the actual case itself with how they finish it. So, you might have brushing going one direction and then brushing going a diagonal direction, and it looks like it's a little bit different, and there's a noticeable cut there in the metal, but I don't think it's a different tone. I think it's all completely matte finish, all brushed.
And I understand people will say, oh, well, it's a tool watch, it's an exploration watch. I mean, all the black bays are pretty tool watch to me, and they've got plenty of different finish on it.
Yeah, and didn't the original Tudor Ranger have a polished bezel, if I'm not mistaken? I'm pretty sure it did, because doesn't the Explorer 1 have a polished bezel?
Explorer 1 definitely does.
Yeah. I know it has a matte bracelet, matte case, but I think it has a polished bezel.
Explorer 1 definitely does, because I know some people who said that the two-tone fixed that faux pas because now it continued the polish down the center links.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I think the think the boys from Whiskey and Watches talked about that many, many months ago, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and what I'm looking at here on the website, it does not look like it has any other finish. There is a bevel on the case for sure, but it just looks like it's a different direction brushing of the satin finish, of the matte finish.
So I'm gonna be curious how that reads on the wrists.
And it's not, from what I can tell, it's not like a sun brush. It's a circular brushing on the bezel. So we'll see if that's going to be a scratch magnet.
Yeah, and then obviously for me, probably I guess the biggest gripe you could probably have with this watch is the sizing. I think a lot of people were looking for this watch in 36 millimeter. I think 34 is asking too much. I think nowadays you're just not going to get that, even though they make a 32 millimeter, I believe, Black Bay. Right? They make a
Yes,
Black Bay 32.
I think
So I
so.
reckon you could probably just throw a little extra housing in there and get that movement to crank over a 34 millimeter
But
watch. But
I also don't think that 32 millimeter Black Bay is an in-house Black Bay. It's
yeah,
probably an
I don't think so either.
yeah, it's probably a small, ETA movement or Solita movement or something like that that they use as a base. So
But I think a lot of people were looking for this in 36. I mean, the Explorer went back to 36.
yeah, I when I saw the size in 39, to me, my first thought was it made sense. But since everyone was all up in arms about the 36 millimeter, the 36 millimeter Explorer one, I know that you were very happy that it went back to its, kind of origin size at
Yep.
36. I think that this would have made sense. My only condition as to maybe why they didn't do it is because that would have been logical. And then they would have really underscored that Tudor's really just delivering all the watches that Rolex can't deliver. Right? It's like, okay, we made the Explorer one go back to 36. Are we going to do the Ranger in 36 as well? Is it going to be competing with our Explorer one? Is it going to take people away from that purchase? I don't know. Maybe we do it in 39.
Yeah, and like I said, I personally did not like the Explorer 1 in 39. I thought it was a little too spaced out, a little
Yeah.
disproportionate in that regard. And I think 36 is just a perfect. It's ideal at 36. And I'm gonna be honest, I thought the original Ranger was really good in 34. I don't think that's feasible by today's standard of what people expect from the sizing of a modern watch.
Yeah.
I think you could get away with 36. But I'll be honest, even the Nevada I have, it's the same similar layout, right? It's that sort of explorer-ish layout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even at 37, I feel like it's a hair big. I'm gonna be honest, as far as
Really?
proportions and spacing goes. It's really cool. I just feel like there's just a touch of
Extra space.
extra space where if you could condense it down just a hair, it would be perfect. Not that it's not good, just an opinion.
Interesting. Interesting. I would say this. I like the watch. I think the casual watch buyer is going to like the watch. I think the watch collector is going to like the watch. I've already seen a lot of memes going around the internet about the Explorer or the Tudor Ranger starter pack with some shoes and different things like that.
I think there
And
was a
the
man bun thrown in there.
Yeah, there was a man bun in there for sure. So again, this is kind of like this is the Houdinki crowd watch for sure. And again, nothing wrong with that. It's gonna sell. It's gonna sell well for Tudor. My biggest complaint overall, it's not the size, not the aesthetics. It's not the bracelet. I think a lot of the choices that they did are going to satiate a lot of Tudor collectors that have been saying some negative things about the brand, ourselves included, for sure. My biggest thing is, again, what are we doing with the movements? Tudor spent all this money to establish master chronometer certifications, and yet here's another reference after they debuted the master chronometer with their black base ceramic earlier this year or last year. I can't remember at this point, but we still don't have a new watch with master chronometer. And again, maybe it's a price point thing, right? It would take it a little bit higher in price point, but even if you sold this watch at $3,500 or $4,000 at with that type of movement, you don't think the market would buy it? I think that they would.
I think it'd be worth it.
I mean, again, you make that the ultimate explorer's watch. If that's how you're marketing this, yeah, it's a great watch. It's got a great power reserve. It's in house, silicon balance spring. Those are all good things, but why not take it a step further? What are you doing with master chronometer? That's what I want to know, because I've heard from so many people that Tudor's really trying to go after Omega, and you guys know where I lie with Omega and my sensibilities. I want to know what they're doing with master chronometer. Why did they push this so heavily? Why is it a big focus? And why haven't they adopted it into anything else in their collection? That's what I don't understand.
My question is, if you make this a master chronometer and you offer this in the size that a lot of people used to like for the Explorer, does that make this a more ideal choice for some people than an Explorer?
100% it does. And I think that maybe that's also part of the problem.
Yeah.
I think that that's also maybe part of the problem, because I even heard from some people that that have carried this line, that carry Tudor, that they always have to say that Tudor has a power reserve of 70 hours, right? But I've heard from those same people that during training, the Tudor reps will say that it actually has a power reserve that's over 80 hours, but they can't openly say that because the Rolex power reserves stop out at 72.
Yeesh.
So that technically specced out wise, you're getting a better timepiece in a Tudor than you are in a Rolex. But they can't openly advertise that because it would detract from the crown itself.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I think they got as close to the sun as they possibly could with the Pelagos, and I think they had to back it down from there. That watch is, I will say it again, that watch is an absolute tank, and I think it would push the sub 1-for-1 right through its paces. I'm not going to say it's going to best it in any way, shape, or form, but man, can it really give it a run for its money? And especially if you're a younger person who wants something in maybe a different color that's not an obnoxious green Starbucks looking watch, a blue Pelagos or an LHD where you get that roulette date, right?
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I happened to see the blue Pelagos just over the last couple of days. I was doing a business trip here in Texas, and there was one sitting in the case line, and I almost texted it to you. I was almost gonna be like, "Hey, bro, I found your watch again.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy
Here
that
it is,
bastard
ready
back
to
one day.
go." Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful. I mean, that color is just so rich. It's so beautiful. Even with all the text on the dial, it's still a fantastic watch. But you're right. I mean, I think that that's a watch that would really rival the Submariner in a lot of different ways. The finishing quality is fantastic. The material is fantastic. It's titanium. The clasp is one of the best clasps ever invented for a dive watch in the history of dive watches. You know, the thing that I love about that clasp is you can actually use it. The glide lock, it never made sense to me. It's a great class for micro adjustment and diving extension, but you have to take your watch off.
Yep, off your wrist.
You have to do that. And that to me never made any sense. Why do I want to take my $10,000 plus diver off my wrist to adjust it when I should be able to do it on the fly while I'm wearing it? I do nothing but increase my chances for theft and for potential drop damage because I have to handle it so much more.
It's one thing Grand Seiko got right.
I mean, the same thing with Omega. I mean,
Yes.
Same thing with Omega. Like, I can open my clasp and I can micro adjust it on my wrist. It never has to leave my hand. And that's something that I don't think that people really realize is a positive selling feature.
So this whole thing left me with, I guess, a burning question, and that is Tudor actually listening to consumers and trying to please people and trying to move watches, or would you consider this more of Rolex stuff you can't get? Because I know the Tudor Ranger existed before, and it's a historical model for them, but this also looks plenty 1016, which is huge in the collector community. A lot of popular writers and things have them, tout them. They gave you the Steve McQueen, they gave you a root beer. Are they now giving you a 1016 alternative because there's no chance of you getting that? And I don't know what your odds are of getting a new Explorer either. So it's a toss-up, I think. I'm not sure, but there's definitely a potential trend developing there.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've touched on this before as well. We've talked about Tudor, and we've bashed them to oblivion on many different episodes throughout this year and last year. But one thing I will say is this: Tudor used to have a definitive design language. It was something that invented in many different ways was the antithesis of its bigger brother with the crown. You look at the original Black Bay with the burgundy bezel, gilt markers, oversized case. It was a very distinctive release. You look at things like the Heritage Chronos. You look at the Tudor Advisor that we talked about last week. You look at the North Flag. It had its own style. Now, we just talked about the Pelagos, right? We just talked about the Pelagos. That is a very distinctly different watch than anything that Rolex would ever produce. But now, everything almost seems as if it's a carbon copy of watches you and I know you cannot get. And I don't know if the Tudor falls into that category, because it is a pre-existing collection. Like, I look at the Black Bay Pro. That to me, that root beer, that to me is more or less, hey, these are two models that we know for sure you cannot get from Rolex. They're vintage. They're extremely desirable in the secondary market. You definitely can't touch them, especially not for price points. Here's an alternative that we can get you, right, from Tudor. But that's not Tudor's history. Those watches didn't exist in the Tudor collection at all. I would say that the Ranger falls into that category, but the only stipulation here is the Ranger actually existed.
Yes.
The other two did not. And I think that's the only saving grace for the Ranger itself. But I'm curious to see, is as we see more evolution of pieces coming out from Tudor, does this trend continue? Do we start to see the whitewashing of the Tudor design concept into just mirroring exactly what you cannot get from its bigger brother?
And I think that's yet to be seen. I think it's honestly, a really, really good question. And I guess we're going to find out in the next couple of years because the trend is going to be apparent.
Yeah. It's going to start to reveal itself one way or the other. If they start dipping back into their heritage pieces and start reactivating some of that, okay, maybe this is just Tudor going back to its catalog like it did in the past, right? But if we start to see, Black Bay 58s coming out with green bezels, or we start to see an update to the GMT, the Tudor Black Bay GMT. If we start to see new things that are coming out that are different, but they look like Rolex models. I mean, we also have the Black Bay Chrono we didn't talk about, the Daytona. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of in that same vein as well. I mean, I would love to see Tudor be like, you know what, we're moving away from the Daytona. Like, I want to come out with the Tudor Big Block again. Like, let's do something cool. Let's do a home plate dial, Monte Carlo. Let's do something that was awesome. Okay, that is what I want to see. If we're gonna do a new diver, let's do a new Submariner, Tudor Submariner, but let's do it with the 90s dials where they had like the triangular markers,
yeah,
as opposed to the rectangles. Like, let's do something different. Let's do it that way. But that makes sense historically for the brand, right? I mean, for many years, Tudor was the little brother of Rolex because they used the same cases, they used the same bracelets, crowns, whatever. The movement and dials were different. That was really the only changes. It was a way to sell the product at a lower price point. And if Tudor wants to really remain its own entity, they need to start focusing on doing that kind of stuff. We need to see them look more to their back catalog and re-envision new pieces from those previous models. Because if not, they'll never step away from Rolex's shadow. And honestly, bro, at this point, I don't even know if it's possible to remove yourself from Rolex's shadow. I think the two are literally inextricably linked.
And that's the other part we talked about is I don't know if they really want to, because at this point they're selling watches because they are linked in that fashion.
Yeah.
Now, and again, I've hammered it a million times. Their dress models suck. The Royal is cute and all, but go back to those Oyster Princes. Go dig into that. There's a million different Oyster Prince references throughout history. Just go back, look at all the good ones, and make some sort of an awesome amalgamation of all of them and release it. That's all I'm asking for. It's not a lot.
I know. You and me both. I mean, the Royal is a perfect example of just an utter miss for me. It's like 4 generations of Tudor Oyster Princes is like smashed into one watch, and it's horrible. It's just not an aesthetically pleasing watch. Engine turn bezels, integrated bracelets, but then you have like date just Roman numerals. It's like what decade are we talking about here? It's just crazy. I want so badly for Tudor to be the brand because they can
Hmm.
be, and I know you share the same sentiment. You love the brand so dearly that it hurts you when they piss you off with dumb things,
Yeah.
and it's just like, and I know a lot of collectors feel that same way. It's like, why are we expressing concern about this if it's never gonna, if nobody's ever gonna listen to us, if it's gonna continue to fall on deaf ears?
Now, I would like to take a moment here and do a little fun exercise. I happened to snap a few screenshots of some commentary from the general public, not even from well known people. This is just anybody. I took a few. They're all over the place, so it's not just for, against, whatever. I'm just gonna roll through these. Some of these are actually hilarious. Others make really good points. So the first one is, if missionary sex was a watch.
Oh God.
That was the description of it. If missionary sex was a watch, I thought that was just
Oh.
kind of funny.
It's pretty curt. It's pretty to the point. I like it. I like it. All
Yeah.
right. What we got next?
Okay. Uh, in general, I like it. Applied markers would have made a difference for me. 36 millimeter option would have also been nice. Under that is a douchey reply. Going to stick to my 1016. Thanks.
Okay, bro.
Yeah.
Jesus. Because
Uh,
you don't already own the watch that everyone wants to own, but they can't get.
yeah. Why are you even looking at this?
Exactly. Like what
Came just to
that's
flex.
that's yeah, but I can also tell you that's probably a guy who like he doesn't even wear his 1016. He probably just leaves it in his watch box and just admires it every day and then
He
picks
just
something
tells
else
you
like a
about it.
Seiko. Yeah, he just got to tell you that he owns it. Uh Next. Thank you.
So
Next.
here's a very enthusiastic one. I love it. Perfect size, perfect thickness. Quick adjust T fit clasp is dreamy. Love the red tip secondhand, and I love the price. If I if I were to look for anything to complain about, it would be the preference for bright white lume versus the tan slash yellow slash green. In parentheses, varies by photo lume. Uh, this will let me forgive Rolex for axing the 39 millimeter Explorer. This definitely fixes wrongs, parentheses, size slash bracelet of the 2014 Ranger and goes above and beyond with movement and clasp. That guy is hyped.
Yeah.
He's camping
That
outside the
yeah.
Tudor boutique.
He's already called 17 ADs across the United States to put his name on a list for the first come first serve. No, I mean, again, I think a lot of his points are valid. We touched on every single one of them. I think 39 for the average consumer is a good size. There's a lot of people in the camp of the Explorer One should be in 39. I have a good collector buddy that has a 39 Explorer. He's like, I would not wear the 36. I'd only wear the 39. So I think his points are fair. I think a lot of it's what we said on the pod already, but it makes sense. It makes sense.
Next up, dial is meh for me. Would have heightened the look with applied indices, TBH. However, T-Fit micro adjusting clasp, in-house caliber for 3K is a steal.
I mean, I agree. What do you think about the applied markers or lack thereof?
It's so hard to tell trying to visualize it in your head. I mean, I don't think he came. I don't think it ever came with them. So it's hard to. It's always hard to bridge that into the future when you like even when you're upgrading materials to like a ceramic. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
hard to envision that and make that transition well and not compromise the integrity of the old style. So I don't know if I would like it or not. I mean, it's definitely a cleaner look.
Yeah, it's definitely a cleaner look. But my only thinking is, I mean, the new Explorer One has applied markers, and it's had them for years now at
Yeah.
this point.
Yes.
And the 1016s were so cool because they were just a flat printed tritium, right?
Yeah.
Like they
Yes.
Rolex made the change to add the applied markers on there, and nobody seems to care about that. So I'm wondering if that's a valid criticism. They could have done the same thing here with the Ranger to update it a little bit more, instead of leaving it kind of in the 1960s. So there's
Here's a
certainly
good one.
there's precedent for it.
He goes, the hot take is they were too lazy to create a new case and movement to put in 36 millimeter as it deserves. However, he says, still probably a buyer though.
You gotta love those Crown fans, man. No matter what, it could be literally a steel piece of garbage, and somebody's gonna buy it. It doesn't matter.
Just get the original. That's what watch collecting is about. There's nothing safer and more boring than spending a lot of money for some random reissue. They sink like stones. It's your punishment for not knowing enough about watches that you have to go to a dealer. Ultimate douche.
Ugh, God, that's okay. The guy probably bought some Franken watches and he doesn't even know it.
He has no idea.
He thinks he's an expert.
This is one of my favorite comments just because it's so random. It's funny. Right. It's a cheeseburger of a watch. Not disappointing and not that interesting at the same time.
Oh my God, that's funny. But I don't know if that's like,
I don't know if it's a compliment or not, but I had a good chuckle
like,
at it.
but it's like I like cheeseburgers. Or like
I think that's what it is.
boring?
I think it's you're never disappointed with a cheeseburger, but you're also not like
Never like impressed. Maybe
you're not trying to wow your date with a cheeseburger.
it's such a random comment.
It is.
It's kind of funny.
enjoyed
It's
it.
right up our alley anyway. That's fine. It's whatever.
All right, I think I got a couple more and then I'm done here. I'm a little confused about the watch fam's response because it really felt like this is what everyone's been asking for. Don't really care what they think. This is the exact watch I've always wanted, and I'll probably end up blowing up my collection in order to get one on the bracelet. Super excited for it, TBH.
Dang, if you gotta blow up your collection to get, what are you collecting?
Maybe he still hasn't made the jump. You know, I was talking about this the other day when I was out and I was talking to somebody about the gut check of broaching those spending thresholds, and once you cross them, it's no big deal. But before you make that jump, it is
man. You know what? You're right.
It's a stomach turner.
Now that I say that, I'm like, I sound like a douche too. I'm like, I remember that time where it's like $500 was a big chunk a big chunk of change, and now it's like there's some watches that I own where their straps are $500.
It's sickening.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Yeah. I mean, $3,000 is still a lot of money for sure.
It's still dope. Last of all, but certainly not least, simply just the emoji for a garbage can.
The guy couldn't even spare the time out the full word trash. Just the emoji of a garbage can.
Could not care less.
Oh my God. That is fantastic. I love that. I love that. I love that. Hey, look, to each their own. I don't know, bro. What are your overall thinking here? I know we kind of touched on this stuff a little bit, but what is your ultimate opinion? Is this a win for you? Is this something that you're going to add to your collection, or are you just going to throw this in the metaphorical trash bin?
I'm not going to say I'm throwing it in the bin. I'm just probably not picking one of these up. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's a sign of progress. I think they are moving into a space where you're seeing them sort of please the collector, but also churn out pretty decent looking watches again.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in the camp. I would have liked a very, very faithful reedition. And again, I like those little quirks that have made the brand great over the years and would have liked to have seen them, because if you're going to reissue something, go the whole way, you know? And I would have liked it. I thought 34 was a very unique size for them, because Rolex did not that many watches in 34. I mean, you can get Air Kings and things in 34. You can get Oyster Perpetuals in 34s going back. And yeah, in their way back catalog, there were more, but recently, not so much at all. So I thought that bringing it in 34 would make it very different from Rolex, although I guess 39 is sort of in between their sizes as well now.
Yeah.
But
from a modern sense.
Yeah, certainly 36 I thought was doable, and it would have been an appropriate size. And I spoke about how I don't like dial spacing in that regard, and that's kind of where it makes sense to me.
But this one does look proportionate. I will say that the hands extend all the way out to the periphery of the dial. They don't look like they're stumpy. I think the proportions here are correct for the dial, even though it is a larger case. But but yeah, man, I really need to see this one in the middle. I mean, we talked a lot about watches that have recently come out. I know we talked about the Super Ocean Heritage from a little while ago, and I'll be honest with you, I was very lukewarm to that watch when it came out. We talked about it on the podcast, but I tried one on this week and I like it.
Which size?
I tried the 42. I think that that's probably going to be the best size for most people. I know you were kind of curious to see the 36 in person. I think visually, it's not the case size that wears small; it's the dial
Dial's going to be
aperture.
very small.
Yeah, and it's only because the chapter ring is so wide in contrast to the main color of the dial. So it naturally, you have a dial open that's pretty big for 36, but then you have, a 3 or 4 millimeter wide chapter ring that makes your dial opening, 15 millimeters or whatever, like something
Yeah.
very small. So I think people could get away wearing the 36, but I think visually it's just naturally funneling your eyes into kind of a smaller, cone like perception of the watch. So 44 is also a decent size. I didn't like that one, to be honest with you. I think it was too big, but the lug to lug is fantastic. The case is fantastic. The finishing is fantastic. I actually like the slow chrono motif in person. I didn't think that I would, but I do, because it's extremely legible. My only criticism was what I mentioned on the podcast. It still holds true with seeing it in person. I just wish that the loom pip of the second hand was larger. I That's the only thing that I wish would be true on the case and on the dial. I just wish it was slightly bigger. I think it would be better overall aesthetically. But that's really a minor complaint. I don't really have an issue with it. I think it looks good just the way that it is as well. So for me, that's a personal gripe, but I think for the average person, it's gonna look just fine.
How was the paddle hand in person?
It was very, very, very sharp in person.
Somebody referred to the Tudor Ranger hour hand as the butt plug hour hand. Now I can't unsee. So enjoy that, everybody.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it is that way, but I will say this: we all know it's been that way for a very, very, very long time. Even the vintage reissue from 2014 had the same. So, uh, what are you gonna do?
And I think what this drop sort of did for me was kind of make me think about what I like and don't like in a vintage reissue.
Yeah,
Because I think overall I'm for them because there's something about vintage designs that makes them timeless, and to ignore them and just let them go and bury them in the past, I think is almost like a crime in that regard.
I agree.
Like people of this generation are never going to be able to just go experience a Connery sub, right? They were over 100 grand. So at least you could pick up a Black Bay 58 and have something in the realm of that and enjoy it and say, hey, this looks like Sean Connery's watch in the James
I
Bond
mean,
film.
and absolutely, and I'll say this too. I mean, even if we take the abstraction away of it being a vintage reissue, look at things like the Moonwatch. Look at the Diver 300 meter. Look at a Royal Oak. Look at a Nautilus. These are all watches that were not designed today.
No, not at
They
all.
were designed in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s. And their design concept was so strong that it still resonates today. To be honest with you, I cannot think off the top of my head a timepiece that I've seen today with truly a unique design that was made in a modern way. Everything that we sell that's popular for the most part is derivative from something from the past. I mean, there's a couple outliers, maybe something like a Grubel 4Z or something like, yeah, but that doesn't look like anything else. It looks like itself, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing to compare it to. But you look at every single popular watch, a Panerai, a Breitling, a Tag, they're all reminiscent of designs from decades past. They might be updated, they might be modernized, but they're all referencing something from before. And that just speaks to the power of design language when people were truly innovative in what they were creating.
And I think that is what invalidates the idea when people say, "Oh, if you reissue something, you're cheapening the older watch, or you're crapping on the legacy, and yada yada." It's always something, right? There's always some gripe like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I will quote Mr. Analog Shift himself, James Lambden. I was watching him one time. I think he jumped in a live stream, and somebody asked him about I think it was a vintage Speedmaster, and they said it was the one of the old 145 models, and they said, I know it's pretty much, it hasn't changed a lot. Why would I get this older one over a brand new one? And he said, well, two people roll up in a Jaguar E-Class, one from the old days, one brand new. Who wins? And I was like, the guy's got a point,
Yeah.
right? The older one is infinitely cooler, and not really for much of a reason other than it just is, right? The design it's different. It's not incredibly different. It's got that same exact aesthetic you were just talking about, where it's a callback and it's modernized, but it's still very much its own car. I mean, it's still very much the same family, but the older one is just cooler. There's just something about it.
There's an inherent level of coolness. I mean, I'll share with you one side story. There's just, things. One of my favorite design concepts in decades and everything like that is the mid-century. I think this is good for a lot of people. And growing up, my first ever car was a 1965 Chevy pickup. And I'll say one thing about this: it had wipers. The wipers ran off the vacuum pump from the engine. Again, there's no electronics in this car, right? So the wipers ran off the vacuum pump of the engine. There's no speed. So there's no variable wiper speed. They open and close about this fast, right? So it's like that's it. There's no high speed, low speed, nothing. So if you're in the middle of a rainstorm and it's raining pretty hard, you literally cannot see out of your windshield, which is crazy. But as a way to counteract this, what Chevy designed is a lip on the top of the roof that acted literally like a gutter on your car. It was a small lip. It would run the periphery of the actual, the top part of the truck, and it would filter down through the front pillars on either side of the windshield to help curtail all of the excess water that you were going to be encountering when you were driving. This is one of the most innovative things in something so simple, because that was the limitations of the technology. And for me, there's something so imperceptible about that idea that, like, hey, this is all we could do, but we're going to make it the best we possibly can with what we got. And for me, that kind of style, that design, that overall language really translates into a lot of these watches that we love to collect and to worship today. Because I look at a classic Ranger from the 1960s, I'm like, that was the best Ranger that Tudor could have created at that time.
Yeah.
Period. They wanted to offer their clients the best watch that they could offer at that time. And that's why, this whole debate about reissue or not reissue. I mean, honestly, every time I look at these modern watches that come out that are really truly their own designs, they're still derivative of something. They've been stylized and riffed off of something. Doesn't matter if it's a micro brand or anything. Like, there is a design that has withstood the test of time and is being emulated, whether in a very direct homage fashion or in more of a tribute fashion or a referencing fashion, but it's still being referenced. And I think that begs the question, like, if you go reissue, do you go all in? Do you do the 34 with a date and just release it and let the market do with it what it will? Is that what you do, bro?
For me, yeah. For me, if I'm going to go reissue, I want to make it the most elite version of itself that I can, while paying tribute, while being respectful to the old design, and while trying not to step on too many toes. Because even at the end of the day, no matter how good I make this watch, even if it's meta certified and all that stuff, it's still not the original.
Yeah.
And it will never be. And so even if it is that amazing, right, the Camaro today will still never beat the 60s Camaro, no matter how
Yeah,
awesome
that's
they
true.
make it.
That's true.
It's just what it is. And I
And
think that's
and I
fine.
and I think
That's
and I think too, for me as well, for this type of watch, I would have loved to see them go, as you always like to joke, whenever people zig, you like to zag. You know, for me, this would have been a golden opportunity for Tudor to say, you know what? Screw it. We're going all in. We're going full send. We're going old school. Here's what we put out. Like it or don't. We don't care. And I think that that would have been the ultimate flex, the ultimate standard. Because even still, there's brands out there today, you know, one of my favorites included, you know, Omega included in this, that are still doing vintage reissues, that they're enlarging sizes. They're taking artistic liberties with them. This would have been a go against the grain moment for Tudor to really do it right and say, you know what? Here's a 34 millimeter, all you Chads out there. This is what we're going to give you. If you don't like it, then don't buy a Tudor.
And with that, I think we did it justice this episode, though. I don't think we bashed too hard. I think people probably came into this episode assuming we were going to destroy this thing, but I don't think it's worth that. I don't think it needs to be, and I don't think it's a bad release at all. In fact, I think it's a pretty good step in the right direction. We've given the goods, the bads, the otherwise, and sort of our own little spin on it. And aside from that, I think a lot of it is just personal preference. I think this will be a hit for a lot of people in the same way that a lot of their more popular models have. Like when Black Bay 58 Blue came out, right? Everybody said, "Oh, it's not a Tudor sub, it's not a bluesy, it's not whatever." Yeah, but people like it and it's in a good size and it fits a lot of those boxes people like to check. And for a lot of people it's a favorite and it's stuck in their collections. Plenty of people have moved on from it, but it's not that they're not putting out models that are completely undesirable, and they're not just doing random stuff. It seems like they're at least trying to please people. The Black Bay Pro seems to have satisfied a lot of people. So we'll see. We'll see if the trend continues or if they're just doing the Rolex, you'll never get this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. We'll see what the future holds. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into yet another episode of the Wrist Cheese Radio podcast. I'm Schmitty. You guys know my buddy, bro. We appreciate you tuning into episode 38, and we'll catch you on the next one.
We bid you adieu.
Adieu.